On today's show, we got the latest on Darius Garland's new right toe injury on Sunday. I'll tell you what the latest update is, why it could be better, it could be worse. We will talk about that and who needs to step up on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi again, everybody. My name is Danny Cunningham, and I cover the Cleveland Cavaliers over at my Substack, The Inside Shot, and you're listening to another edition of Locked On Cavs, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network in all of America. You can find this show the same place you can find any other Locked On podcast. That is on Apple, that is on Spotify, and that is on YouTube as well. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button for us, and make sure you are subscribed wherever else you might be listening. And today's episode of Locked On Cavs is brought to you by FanDuel. Before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. On today's show, we will cover the latest Darius Garland injury news, plus who needs to step up, some other injury updates from practice on Sunday as we head into a week of Cavs games, plus Rylan Stiles from Locked On Thunder is going to stop by a little bit later to preview Monday's game between the two teams. But we have to start with the Darius Garland news because the Cavs put out a status update. Yes, the vaunted status update that throws everybody into a panic when it comes across Twitter or their email feed. And the status update, I want to read this verbatim before we kind of dive into what else I know. And it said, Cavaliers guard Darius Garland injured his right great toe on January 14th at Philadelphia. Further evaluation and imaging at Cleveland Clinic Sports Medicine on Saturday revealed a grade 1 right great toe sprain. Garland will be reevaluated in 7 to 10 days. During that evaluation period, Garland will undergo a series of treatment and rehabilitation, and his status will be updated as appropriate. So a couple of things to take away from that. One, a grade 1 sprain is not the best news in the world, but I don't think that this is the worst news in the world either. Like, is this injury as bad as the toe injury that cost Darius Garland the postseason last year and I think cost the Cavs a deep run in the playoffs? No, this is not the same level of concern, but I do think it's worth looking back at what happened last year because I think how the Cavs handle this is a very important thing for how the rest of their season plays out. So we all think of Darius Garland's toe as being the thing that was such an issue in the postseason, and it was. But how did we get to that point? Why was it such an issue in the postseason? Because if you think about it, that toe injury for Garland originally happened during the regular season. He was playing through a toe injury, a toe sprain, whatever you want to call it, of a low grade during the regular season, and then it got re-aggravated in, I believe it was game 2 against the Miami Heat in that first round. And after that point, Darius Garland was not the same. Now, Garland during the regular season last year played a lot of basketball games and he was awesome. But down the stretch of the season is when he was dealing with that toe injury, and he had some really, really strong performances while playing through it, but he only missed one game. And that game that he missed was not necessarily a big game, let's just say. It was the third to last regular season game, I believe, against the Indiana Pacers. And in that game, Darius did not play. Donovan Mitchell, who was dealing with an ankle sprain, also did not play. Max Strus did not play, and Evan Mobley did not play. This was also one of the games, I believe, where Jarrett Allen only played the first half, where he did not play a full game, and it was in order to keep his ability to play in all 82 games alive last year. So Darius, a lot of the season last year, not a lot of the season, but the back half of the season last year was playing through injuries. You think about the hip injury that he suffered against the New York Knicks right after the All-Star break, and then there was this toe thing. And the toe thing didn't necessarily get the time to recover that maybe this one will. And I can't sit here and say, yes, the reason why Darius Garland's toe got worse is because he didn't get the rest during the regular season. I don't know that. But I do think that giving Darius Garland some time here is a wise move for the Cavs. And I think that this is the proper way for this to be handled. And the one other thing that I want to point out here from this release is that it says Darius Garland is going to be reevaluated in 7 to 10 days. that does not mean he returns in 7 to 10 days. Now, the fact that the reevaluation period is only 7 to 10 days, 1 week to 10 days from now, which would get us, a week from now is next Sunday or Monday, 10 days from now is next Tuesday or Wednesday. Like, that is a good sign that it leads me to believe that this is not going to be a long-term thing. Like, if the Cavs would have come out on Sunday and said, yeah, Darius has a grade 2 toe sprain and we're going to reevaluate him in a month, then I think it's time to press the panic button. But I do think that this is a relatively, I don't want to say minor, but I just don't think it's as big of a deal as the other foot. And of course, he needs to rest. He needs to do the rehabilitation process. He needs to get better because the Cavs need Darius Garland at his best to have a chance. But I look at this and say, is this the best possible news that the Cavs could have gotten? No. The best possible news would have been, he just kind of jammed his toe. He'll be fine. Like, it's not a big deal. So it's not the best possible news, but it's not the worst possible news either. Like, I do think that if this is handled well, this could just be a non-factor once Darius Garland is back. I would not anticipate this being something that lingers the same way that his other toe did, because that has obviously lingered on now for a very long time, considering he first injured it, I believe, in April of last year. So for this injury to be listed as the same thing as the one last year, I get why that causes a sense of panic, but I don't think that this is one that is as concerning as what happened last year. And I think that having some time off will do Darius good. And I do think, too, the hidden benefit to this is that this gives Darius his other foot, who he told ESPN last week he was about 70%. That gives him a little bit more time to get that foot back, to get that toe injury back to normal. And I just think that ultimately will be a good thing. Now, with Darius Garland being out, that means that there are some guys that do need to pick up the slack. And I think that it's a group of 4 players that the Cavs need to ask more from. And it's not going to be the same guy every night. It's not going to be the same combination of guys every night. But with Darius out, and we will get into some other injury notes and updates from practice on Sunday at Cleveland Clinic Courts, but Sam Merrill is out on Monday. I don't know how long he is going to be out. I think things are a little bit less definitive there, but I don't think it'll be as long as Darius. But like with both of those guys out, the Cavs will need more guys to step up. I don't think that they have just one player on the roster that you can say, okay, go replace Darius Garland's production. It's going to take 2 or 3 guys. And the guys that I have circled for that are Jalen Tyson, who has been awesome lately and obviously was phenomenal against the Philadelphia 76ers on Friday when the Cavs last played. I think Craig Porter Jr. is in this group. I think Lonzo Ball is in this group. And I also think Tyrese Proctor is going to get an opportunity in this group. And I want to start with Jalen and why I think he's important here, because he has obviously had a season that nobody necessarily anticipated him to have. As I've said many times, thought he would do a lot of good things for this Cavs team, did not think that he would be the best 3-point shooter in basketball amongst guys that are taking over 4 attempts per game. So that is obviously a surprise, but he's been very good. And I think that what we need to see from Jalen with Darius out, and why I think the Cavs are a little bit more prepared to go through a stretch without Darius Garland than they were at the start of the season, is because of Jalen. Because what we saw from, and I'm not saying that he needs to go out and score 39 points the way he did on Friday, but think about the way that he played on Friday, where he had the basketball in his hands a little bit more. He's creating for others a little bit more. Like, think about the one dunk that Naquan Tomlin had that was set up from Jalen Tyson. Think about the dunk that Evan Mobley had to win the game that was set up from Jalen Tyson. I think we're going to see him in more situations like that, because the Cavs do have the option, should they choose, to start Donovan Mitchell at point guard. That's not the direction I would go if I were Kenny Atkinson, but it is a direction they could go if they so choose. And if that is the case, that means there's going to be more of a playmaking onus on Jalen Tyson. And Jalen does have that history. When he was in college, he basically was a point forward at Cal. The basketball was in his hands very frequently throughout his collegiate career, because quite frankly, the rest of that roster was not very good and they needed Jalen Tyson to do everything. But I do think one of the benefits to that is it prepared Tyson to potentially be in a situation like this, where he can spread his wings a little bit. And is it going to look at the same as Darius Garland? No. Is it going to look as good as Darius Garland at his best? Probably not. It's going to look different. but it's an opportunity for Jalen to grow. It's an opportunity for the Cavs to build up a little bit more trust in somebody like Jalen, who they very clearly are going to need when things matter, when they get to the postseason. Like Jalen Tyson's going to have to be a big part of it. And I think him getting some on-ball reps, not saying that he's going to be the guy that is leading everything, but they're going to need him to do a little bit more of the heavy lifting offensively than he has been so far this season. Everything he's done has been really, really impressive, and I would expect him to succeed in this area. It's not going to look like Darius Garland, but I do think it's something that we are going to see from Jalen Tyson that is going to be important for how the Cavs can navigate the next 10 days to 2 weeks, however long Darius Garland is going to miss. That's going to be part of it. Now, the other three guys are Craig Porter Jr., Lonzo Ball, and even Tyrese Proctor. We'll talk about those guys, plus a few more injury updates from Cavs practice on Sunday next, right here on Locked On Cavs. But first, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better because every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame. It's a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action begins. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time are appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new. Boosts, bonuses, other fun surprises. You never know what you're going to get, but you know it's going to be great. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make your move before the window closes. The timing, it's perfect. It's right before the games, right before the weekend starts. It's a way to get a little bit of extra energy in your Friday night basketball without having to overthink it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making today's edition of Locked On Cavs your first listen or watch on YouTube. And if you are an everydayer, you might want to go check out the new Everydayer Club because it gives you access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Cavs, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. Plus, there's an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which does include a group chat just for listeners of this show. You can check out the Everydayer Club at the link in the show description wherever you're listening to this podcast, and it is in the description on YouTube as well. I mentioned Jalen Tyson is a guy that needs to step up. I think Craig Porter Jr. probably is number 2 on that list. Now, Craig was in the starting lineup on Friday in Darius's first game out. I think it does make sense to keep CPJ in that spot moving forward. And I like Craig in the starting lineup alongside Donovan Mitchell, mostly because I just don't think that putting the extra load on Donovan Mitchell as a full-time starting point guard, or I guess part-time right now with Darius Garland out, is wise. And I think having somebody else of that type of player, like that style of player, like Craig alongside Donovan Mitchell and alongside Jalen Tyson, who I also think should be in the starting lineup for a little bit here at least, I think that is something that makes a lot of sense. And Craig has done, I think, a really good job of playmaking. I think he needs to pick up the scoring load a little bit. Like he was, I believe, 1 for 5 against Philly and only had 2 points in that game, but he did have 11 assists. And is that a perfect Craig Porter Jr. night? I don't know. I think you'd like him to see a little bit better than just 1 of 5 from the floor. But I also think that, the playmaking stuff, you can't count on 11 assists from Craig Porter Jr. every night. And that's obviously a very, very good place to be if you're the Cavs. And I think that him defensively playing the way that he has been is a very good thing for the Cavs and could add some punch to the Cavs starting lineup as far as that goes. But I do think there needs to be just a little bit better scoring from CPJ. And then Lonzo Ball is on this list as well. I kind of think it's now or never time for Lonzo. He played both games against Philly, and I thought he was solid on Wednesday night. And I thought, I didn't think he was good on Friday against the Sixers, but I didn't think he was bad on Friday against the Sixers either. I just kind of thought he just was there. He missed the shots that he took, which with how open he's going to be, that's kind of a painful thing for the Cavs offensively. He created a couple of turnovers. He obviously threw a really good entry pass to Jalen Tyson to set up the game-winning dunk by Evan Mobley. He did some good things. It's never all good and never all bad with anybody. But if he can get rolling a little bit, or if he can just not be a negative for a little bit, I think that would be a really big boost for the Cavs. And Lonzo has, I think, with more rest, looked a little bit better. The Cavs are not going to have a ton of rest coming up, so maybe Lonzo being in the rotation every single game isn't ideal, but can he have a good night or a good afternoon, I guess, on Monday where the Cavs have had a couple of days off? Maybe. Like, I think that will be something really interesting to watch. And I do think, too, finally, Tyrese Proctor should get minutes with Darius Garland out. I was really impressed with the way that Proctor played and with Sam Merrill out, too. Like, when Sam gets back, which I would guess is before Darius gets back, when Sam was out on Friday, I thought it made a lot of sense to put Tyrese in the rotation. And I was very impressed with the way that not only he played, but handled himself, scoring more points than minutes played. Scoring 13 points in 11 minutes was a big, but the Cavs don't win that game on Friday without Tyrese Proctor doing what he was able to do. And is every game that he plays going to look like that? Probably not. Like, that's an unfair expectation for him. But I do think that Tyrese Proctor can be somebody that has an impact on good things for the Cavaliers. It's not going to be an every night thing. Like, he's a rookie still. He was still a second round draft pick for a reason. Like, they are going to have to live with some growing pains if he's in the rotation right now. But I do think right now having him in the rotation is something that could be a benefit for them down the line. And it's something that I look at and say it would be wise to the Cavs, given what they're missing from Darius Garland, especially in terms of the shooting end with Sam Merrill out. We know that Tyrese Proctor can really shoot the cover off the basketball when he gets going, as we saw on Friday against the Sixers. So I think that would be a really good sign if he can be in the rotation while Darius is out too. And then there were some other injury updates on Sunday because the Cavs did have practice. Sam Merrill did not practice. He will not play against the Oklahoma City Thunder on Monday. Sam is dealing with that hand injury from, I don't think that this one is as concerning as the previous one was. Now, it's obviously the same hand. Like, this is not just a brand new injury for Sam, but I would not anticipate him to miss a month at this point. So he's not going to play on Monday. I don't know if he's going to play on Wednesday when the Cavs are in Charlotte, but I wouldn't anticipate him to miss a long stretch of time. Dean Wade did practice with the Cavs on Sunday. He is listed as probable against Oklahoma City. Kenny Atkinson said, they'll see prior to the game what he looks like if he's going to play, but I would imagine that he does play. He's missed 7 out of the last 8 games. I think the Cavs have missed him. When he's back, I would imagine he's on a bit of a minutes restriction, and I don't think that it necessarily would make sense to put him in the starting lineup. Max Strus did not practice, but he did go through some stuff on the floor, what I would probably best describe as like a light workout. He did that after practice and just looks like a guy that's trending in the right direction. I think at this point, the goal should be for Max Strus to play in basketball games prior to the All-Star break. We will see if that happens. We are almost 2 weeks out from when the Cavs put out their previous update about Max Strus, which said he'd be reevaluated within the next 4 weeks. So that means really 10 days to 2 weeks from now, we should get another update on Max Strus somewhere in that time frame. So maybe it's along, like, he and Darius Garland might be on a similar path to return to the Cavs. So those things I do think are important. The Cavs are going to obviously miss the guys that are out, but they are getting some reinforcements at the very least, with Dean Wade likely making his return to the floor for the Cavs against the Thunder on Monday. And speaking of the Thunder, now Rylan Stiles from Locked On Thunder, he's going to join the show for the last segment. We'll talk about everything going on with OKC. Heads up though, this interview, I should talk normal. This interview was recorded with Rylan on Saturday prior to the Thunder taking on the Miami Heat. Obviously, Miami lost that game, and Jalen Williams got hurt in that game. Jalen Williams not going to play against the Cavs on Monday, so that is one part of our conversation that doesn't necessarily hold up, but Rylan Stiles next with me right here on Locked On Cavs. But first, today's show is brought to you by Game Time. During basketball, there's nothing like being in the building. The energy, the crowd, the first big run that gets everybody on their feet, and fans want to be there for those moments. They don't want to be stuck refreshing screens or guessing what tickets are really going to cost. And that's where Game Time comes in. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage back. They make it incredibly easy to score amazing tickets, fast, simple, and without the guesswork. Browsing the Game Time app is straightforward and simple. Finding tickets takes just a few taps, and seeing the view from your seat before buying makes choosing tickets easy, and you can be confident in your purchase. Plus, prices include fees up front. I love this about Game Time. When I'm buying a ticket, I want to know what it's actually going to cost. I don't want some number and then at the end a totally different number. I want to know. I want transparency. Game Time does that. And they also have zone deals where you can unlock great seats at even better value. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account with Game Time and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That is LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Back for the first time this year is Rylan Stiles, the man who does a better job covering the Oklahoma City Thunder than anybody else for my money. You can check him out over at Locked On Thunder. And Oklahoma City, coming off a championship, is once again the best team in basketball, though I don't think they've necessarily looked completely dominant for the entire first half of the season. Maybe, I guess, against teams not named San Antonio they have been. But Rylan, so far this year, what is your general synopsis of Oklahoma City been?
Yeah, I think that the Thunder, they're in a weird spot right now because individually, a lot of players have gotten better. Like Chet Holmgren has taken a step forward offensively. AJ Mitchell in year 2 is a much better defender than he was previously. And obviously his rookie season was cut short due to injury. And he's really helped this team as a guy who can get to the line, get into the paint, score at the rim, set the table for other guys. But you have not seen the improvement team-wide rub off and alleviate some of the same concerns that they had a year ago. They're still a very streaky three-point shooting team. They can still stall out in the half court offensively if a game slows down on them, and that's led to some issues in their losses so far. I think that that's been a big deal. And then they also had to go through a period this year, which I was shocked by because this team is so based and rooted in 1 of 82 and 0-0, and you can't go 2 seconds without hearing the Thunder talk about that and stacking days. And yet they still fell into a bit of a complacency lull, like getting blown out by the Charlotte Hornets during that messy stretch. That's the first time we've seen the Thunder just not show up for a game during this iteration of the team. That's what's made them so uncommon to this point. But they've made it through that, and they're on a 5-game winning streak, and they're going to get through this on the other side of it with really the same team that they had a year ago, but also that means the same flaws that they had a year ago. So they're not invincible, but they are really well positioned to try to go back to back.
Do you think that game against Charlotte was sort of a wake-up call for them? You mentioned, getting blown out. They lost that game by 27 points at home against the Hornets, which is, as you mentioned, for this iteration of the Thunder, unheard of. And then they followed up with 2 wins against the Jazz by 4 points. And I guess really here in Cleveland, we can't speak about that because the Jazz just beat the Cavs last week, but then also beat a not so great Memphis team by just 1 point and then started to turn it around. Like, was that Charlotte game a wake-up call or was it something else?
Yeah, I think that it was a wake-up call. And Alex Caruso had been talking about this in the locker room for 2 weeks leading into that Hornets game of like, this team does not have the right approach and the right mentality for the target that's on their back. And he talked about how last year they were the ones who threw the first punch every night because they were still trying to garner that respect from the rest of the NBA. And now you've seen teams throw the first punch at them, and they have not been able to get up for a lot of these games to the same level, especially of a San Antonio who beat them 3 straight times. And so it's one thing to say those things when you're losing to good teams, and you can kind of not let that force any panic into you. But then whenever you come out there and think that you can just roll the ball out there and beat Charlotte, and like you mentioned, the Utah game, they got up by 20 points against Utah early on, and then they thought, you know what, this game's over, right? I mean, Utah's a bad team. Thunder up by 20. We're a good team. And then the Jazz never went away, so you had to go to overtime to win that one. So I think that it was a week of wake-up calls for them, and they finally stopped hitting the snooze button and got back on track. And this last week of the season, leading into this Cavs game, you watch them against Miami Saturday, big third-quarter run, blows the game out. San Antonio on Tuesday, big third-quarter run, blows the game out. Houston on Thursday, big third-quarter run, fourth-quarter run, blows the game out. That's the Thunder's formula from a year ago. The Thunder were dominant last year. They had a historic point differential, but it wasn't like from opening tip to the final buzzer, they were up by 20 the entire time. They just kept it within striking distance enough to eventually go on a back-breaking run that got them a ton of lopsided wins. They've done that this year whenever they've been at their best. And right now, even for that messy stretch, they have the same record that they did at the halfway point of last season with even better point differential than they had at last season's halfway point. So the Thunder have to continue to find a way to dig into that mentality and not just coast through the rest of the second half.
Obviously, last year, Shea had an incredible season, wins the MVP, wins the finals MVP, which is just a remarkable season, a historic season on an all-time great team. This year, he is the odds-on favorite, a heavy favorite with our friends at FanDuel to repeat as the MVP. Part of that is how well he's played. Part of that is how injured some of the other MVP favorites preseason-wise have been so far this year. But what have you thought of the player that he's been this year compared to who he was last year?
Danny, I think that we've talked about Shea a lot, privately, publicly, and this is a guy who has continued to improve every year of his NBA career. And this was another year that you thought that you could put him in a box. Like whenever he was a fringe all-star, then he was an all-star starter. It was like, okay, this is kind of a great developmental story for a mid-lottery pick. Like this is going to be a great guy for Shea. Then he's top 5 in MVP. Then he's the MVP. And you're thinking after last year, there's nothing left for him to achieve. Scoring title, sweeps the MVP awards at all three stages. And then this year, he's gotten better as a three-point shooter. He's gotten better as a playmaker. And you saw him against Houston. While he did keep his 20-point streak alive, he had to defer to other guys because of the attention that he got. He's bending the defense with that gravity that he has to get hockey assists, to get actual assists, and to keep the Thunder's offense in rhythm. So those two areas, he's really improved. And I think that in the postseason, those areas will shine greatly. If someone has kind of put the Thunder on the back burner because, we know what the Thunder are, let's dig into some of these other teams, I think come playoff time, people are going to be pretty surprised at how much better Shea is at launching threes and getting his teammates involved.
Next, I want to ask about Jalen Williams, J-Dub, because he had an awesome season last year, made All-NBA, was an all-star, all-defense team, just did a lot of really good things in a way that I just don't think a lot of people expected him when he was drafted 12th overall back in 2022, has a incredible postseason run, and then has to have his wrist fixed because he was playing through, and I don't remember the exact specific injury, but was playing through a serious wrist injury during the postseason. And then he misses the first, I think it was 17 games of this season or somewhere along those lines. And he's not necessarily been the same exact guy so far this season, but what are the hopes that he's going to return to that postseason form where he was just so instrumental in winning a title for the Thunder last year?
Yeah, this is what everything hinges on for Oklahoma City. And I don't think that there's any long-term concerns as in future years, but there is short-term concerns because this is someone who's coming off of that torn ligament in his wrist and had to have 2 surgeries to get it fully repaired. And you look around the league at other guys who have dealt with wrist surgeries, and Jaylen Brown has talked about his recovery. Brandon Miller's talked about his recovery. If it takes years to get back to what you were before, and that's been the same thing for J-Dub. He's come back and he just cannot shoot the ball right now to the point that he's really limited his 3-point attempts, and even in the mid-range recently, he has not been taking those mid-range jumpers because that's no longer a quality shot for him given where he's at in his recovery, and that used to be part of his bread and butter. But he has done a good job of changing his mentality, of just being a force downhill, trying to score at the rim. He did a great job against San Antonio with 20 points on great efficiency, getting downhill on Wemby and on the Spurs. And then against Houston, while he was not a good scorer in that game because of the way that the Rockets can pack the paint, he did have 10 assists to 0 turnovers and kept the Thunder's offense in a rhythm. However, you're looking at a guy that the Thunder need to be able to hit jump shots in the postseason, and he has 3 months to figure it out. Now, that is a concern because we don't know for sure if he will or won't be able to shoot in the postseason, but this was someone who tore the ligaments in his wrist with 2 games to go in the regular season last year, and within 2 weeks had reinvented his jump shot and found the way to be effective in the playoffs. And it was an up and down playoffs to start. Then he really stabilized himself in the conference finals and NBA finals to go for 40 points in the finals and help this Thunder team win. And there was even a little bit of buzz about like, could he be the NBA finals MVP before Shea gets the award? So he he had 2 weeks to do it. Now he has 3 months to do it, but it is going to be very challenging. He's talked about how, the grip strength has been different. The feel of how the ball just like glues to his hand is much different. The range of motion of his wrist is still very limited from where it was before. This is all very hard to do. And again, there's no concern about next year or the years after, but there is concern about this season. And if he can't return to the jump shooter that he was by the times that the playoffs roll around, the Thunder will be fighting an uphill battle.
I do think that'll be an interesting one, maybe the most interesting subplot with the Thunder to watch, because everybody knows how good the rest of this roster is. But I do think that there are some other teams in the Western Conference that are certainly capable of beating them in a series. And if J-Dub is not the same guy that he was last year, I think that opens up the door a little bit more. And before you and I pressed record on this edition of Locked on Cavs, we were talking about the upcoming All-Star game, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander going to be part of the festivities. He'll be a starter, having an incredible season. Chet Holmgren might be there for the first time. We don't know that as of now. I think he probably will be, and I know that you think so too. But what has changed from who he has been? And I know that this is just sort of development and guys do get better, but what makes him, in your opinion, an all-star now for the first time in his career?
Yeah, I mean, not only does he have the counting stats of, 17.9 points per game, 8 rebounds a night, an assist a night, shooting very well, efficiently, 57% from the floor and 37% from three. But his mentality has changed a lot. And I know that he has not performed offensively to the level that you expect against San Antonio. And that's been the games that have really caused a lot of buzz around his game. I think that he did a good job on Tuesday settling back into being at least impactful defensively against San Antonio, but still lacked offensively. But that's not been the story of Chet's season. It's been the story of that regular season series with San Antonio. This season, Chet has changed his identity offensively in a big way. He's really taken shape as a play finisher for this roster. He's cutting more than ever. On pick and rolls, he's diving to the rim instead of popping out more than ever before. He's getting putbacks by hanging around the rim, and really doing a good job of making himself available at the dunker spot for this drive-heavy system. And previously, you'd see Chet almost exclusively hang around that three-point line and almost afraid to get in the way of these drivers. But this year, he's really cognitive of the space that he can take up for these drivers as a dump-off option once you get the defense to commit to Shai or commit to J-Dub, and hanging around there to be available if they happen to miss a layup or miss a three and put the ball back. So his just in general nature of being around the rim more and in the paint more has really helped him. He's scoring a career high at all three levels. Whenever you look at the rim, you look at the mid-range, and at the three-point line, he's playing really well there as well. But at the rim's been the biggest part of Chet's game. And Marcus talked about that a lot. Chet's talked about that a lot, of his improved foundation of physicality, of just strength, has let him do that. And I think that when you look at his overall impact and you look at his overall season, he has been someone who deserves an all-star selection, even whenever you look at it and say, well, this team, if you just want to ignore how good he's been individually, whenever teams win at this clip, Danny, they get 2 all-stars in the game every single time. And they deserve 2 all-stars. And since Christmas, he's averaging 18 points a night with 3 blocks a night, with 10 rebounds a night, averaging a double-double in that stretch while shooting 60% from the floor. He's not only playing at an all-star level since Christmas, an all-NBA level since Christmas when you factor in the games required to play and all that goes into the all-NBA season right now. So Chet Holmgren has made individual improvements that worthy an all-star. And he's similar to J-Dub, Danny. Last year with J-Dub, around this time, we were like, J-Dub's having a good season. He might get in the all-star game. He'll probably get in because of the record, right? And then once he got crowned an all-star, the rest of that second half of the year, he was an all-NBA level player and made the all-NBA team.
Yeah, I think that is also, just to relate this to the Cavs, I feel like that's a very similar track to what Evan Mobley had last year. Like, I think that resembles a lot of Evan Mobley's season last year. And I see a lot of similarities, not just because they're both tall, but in the season that Evan had last year and the season that Chet is having this year. And I think as I look at the standings, like Oklahoma City in the Western Conference is very clearly in a tier alone by themselves. There's no one else in that top tier for me in the Western Conference, but there's a group of 4 teams that I think are in the tier below. And you look at the Spurs, who have had obviously a lot of success in the regular season against the Thunder this year, the Denver Nuggets, who took the Thunder to 7 games last year, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have been a playoff opponent, the new look Houston Rockets with Kevin Durant. Of that group of teams, which one do you think is the biggest threat to Oklahoma City when the playoffs arrive?
I think it's the Denver Nuggets. And I think that the Denver Nuggets have shown so much this year that if you're just going to tier it off based upon who can win a title from the Western Conference, I would put Denver in the same tier as OKC. In that first tier, those two by themselves. Now, of course, if you are going to go totality-wise of like, who do you trust to get the 1 seed and win regular season games and a title, obviously OKC would be by themselves. Right. But if it's just about a title, it's OKC Denver. Then there's a small step back a little bit just because of how inexperienced they are, and you've got to see them do it in the playoffs. But then it's San Antonio. And then after San Antonio, I think that you can get into Houston and Minnesota. They have some obvious deficiencies, especially at the point guard position for both those clubs. Minnesota and OKC, we saw last year how those two teams match up in the playoffs, and they lose Nickeil Alexander-Walker now and haven't replaced him to the level that they expected to replace him. And I think that last year, Minnesota can point to that win that they had over OKC in December. But last year they beat OKC twice in February, and that was more than they won in the entire series in the Western Conference Finals against OKC. So I don't put much stock into the single regular season games, but I do think that Denver is a legitimate, serious threat. I think that San Antonio is a serious threat, but Denver, the biggest one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do have to say, I know this is not a podcast about the Denver Nuggets right now, but what they have done without Nikola Jokic for the amount of time that he's been out has been wildly impressive. And I agree. Like, I think that, especially after watching them, which I thought last year's version of the Denver Nuggets was a lesser version of who they are now, but taking last year's OKC team to 7 games and like sign me up to watch that series in the postseason. I think that would be just incredible basketball and something that I hope we get in the spring. And of course we will get 2 regular season matchups between the Cavs and the Thunder, with the first one being on Monday and the next one being in Oklahoma City a little bit later on. But if you want to learn more about the Thunder, not only before the Cavs take them on MLK Day, but throughout the season, Rylan is your guy to go to. You can check him out over at Locked On Thunder. Rylan, thank you so much for the time, man.
Thanks for having me. Love hopping on Locked On Cavs.
Big thanks to Rylan for stopping by, talking a little bit of Cavs Thunder prior to Monday's game between the two teams. Should be a very interesting one, and starts a big stretch for the Cavs without Darius Garland. They've got the Thunder on Monday, then they take on the Charlotte Hornets on Wednesday, the Sacramento Kings on Friday, and the Orlando Magic on Saturday this week. I will have previews of all those games over at Locked On Cavs a little bit later on this week, and I will have you covered on Monday after the Cavs take on the Thunder. So as we get out of here, please do me a favor. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you're listening to the show. That is Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube. And if you're watching right now on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button and the notification bell as we get out of here, and I will have you covered a little bit later after Cavs take on the Thunder.